Okay, with your expertise and experience, why do they go after the Christians?
Well, look, in addition to fighting sort of a military campaign, ISIS has a really apocalyptic view of things. I mean, they look at this as the end of times. And so this is not just a battle. They're not just carving out a territory. The world is effectively coming to an end. Islam is going to triumph, and everybody else is going to be annihilated. So when you really get down to the core of it, that's actually the way they think.
Further, you said Clinton and Obama created ISIS. Is that by pulling out too early before the job was done? Is that what you meant by that comment?
Largely, that was one of the reasons. That's one of the ways that ISIS happened. The way he pulled out was absolutely, number one, he announced a date so that the enemy just withdrew, waited, and then they go back in. ISIS was formed, and you could say very nicely that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama gave us ISIS.
Barack Obama is to blame for the rise of ISIL. He has dismantled the ability to defend this country. We no longer interrogate terrorist suspects. We read them their rights and put them in federal court. We're going to have less FBI agents in 2017 than we did in 2013. In that regard, I blame President Obama.
Just this week, Michelle Bachmann actually predicted that I would bring about the biblical end of days. Now that's a legacy. That's big. I mean, Lincoln, Washington, they didn't do that.
Because they have a kind of apocalyptic view of what they are doing. They truly believe that the end times are here, that they are part of a cosmic struggle between good and evil, and they're the good guys. This is arguably the most successful terrorist group in history in terms of recruitment and land that it controls. But their worldview is that they are leading the fight to bring true Islam to the
Michael,
Muslim
what
world.
message do you think that they're sending to Christians around the world?
We're coming to get you. I mean, they've sent that message before in Iraq, haven't they? Look, you know, ISIS bills its campaign as one ranged against what they call the Crusader Jewish conspiracy. The Crusaders being the United States, the Jews being Israel, and, you know, its assorted allies and such.
Intelligence officials in Pakistan say a local commander from the terrorist network Islamic State has admitted receiving funds transferred via the U.S. He made the confession while being interrogated. RT's Ganesh Chichkan has the story.
The Pakistani police arrested an ISIS commander, Yusuf al-Salafi, and sources told Pakistan's Express Tribune that the commander confessed to receiving funds routed through the United States to recruit young people to fight in Syria.
That she was sitting in class like she normally does. The gunman came in with his gun blazing. Here's what she told her father and brother.
Sociologist
No problem.
The gentleman was systematically...
He came in, right?
He came in, and there were gunfire immediately and scattered the room, got everyone's attention. From what I understood, what she said is he shot the professor point blank, right? One shot killed him, took him right out of it, and others had been injured. And then this man had enough time. I don't know how much time elapsed before he was able to stand there and start asking people one by one what their religion was. Are you a Christian? He would ask them. And if you're a Christian, stand up. And they would stand up, and he said, good, because you're a Christian, you're going to see God in just about 1 second. And then he shot and killed them. And he kept going down the line doing this.
It targeted Christian families as they celebrated Easter. Police in Pakistan are hunting militants behind a suicide bomb attack that's killed dozens of people and injured at least 300 more. Sunday's blast happened in a park in the eastern city of Lahore. A Taliban faction has claimed responsibility, a faction that once declared ties with the so-called Islamic State.
Christians are targets in the Mideast, but President Obama will not give Christian refugees priority in coming to America. He says there will be no religious test for entry. However, a closer look reveals a system that overwhelmingly favors Muslims. It is a system that keeps Christians out. Here's how it works. Those Syrian refugees, who we are supposedly vetting thoroughly, come from camps run by the United Nations. There are no Christians in those camps. They risk death if they seek refuge there. So the refugees who are on the list, who get on the list, They're almost entirely Muslim. The UN system, accepted by Mr. Obama, effectively locks Christians out. This is appalling. President Obama has failed to acknowledge the grave crisis for Christianity in the Mideast. Quite simply, the whole region is being ethnically cleansed. The Christian presence will soon be gone entirely, and the slaughter continues. Think about it. Christians are refugees fleeing terror. They're not migrants looking for a better economy. For them, it's life or death. They are the true victims of religious tyranny. Frankly, I think they qualify as victims of genocide. But Mr. Obama will not acknowledge their unique and horrific situation. Instead, we accept and pay for large numbers of Muslims. We are accepting here a religious test that's being imposed over there.
You're absolutely right calling this an ethnic cleansing. It's a religious cleansing. We're seeing Christians being exterminated across the Middle East, and you're absolutely right. This government, this administration, for whatever reason, has a problem bringing Christians into the country. And I want to give you an example. In San Diego right now, the government, the Obama administration, is trying to deport Christians from the Middle East. Now, there's this argument being waged right now, we've got to let everybody in. And if that's the case, then why is the Obama administration trying to deport these Middle Eastern Christians who came here escaping this persecution?
Did they come across the Mexican border? Is that how they got in?
I believe that is how they got caught. And they've got to go. And it's not just there. A couple of years, or last year, I did a story about a Christian homeschooling family from Germany where homeschoolers are not allowed to homeschool their kids there. And the Obama administration fought tooth and nail, went through the court system to try to have this family deported. They said this Christian family did not have a right to seek asylum here based on the fact they wanted to homeschool their kids. And so I remind people of that in my columns. When you hear this government saying, oh, we want to welcome everybody in no matter what their religion is. Well, we now know that is not exactly true.
Well said, Todd. Now, there's a story that you brought to us first, and this is the story of that Virginia school system.
Yeah.
It's Augusta County. It's under fire for having students practice calligraphy by writing, "There is no God but Allah," in Arabic script.
The latest report involves the Christian Coptic Church of the Virgin Mary and Father Abram. It stood near the Nile River since the 4th or 5th century. Nobody's really sure. It survived the Romans, the Crusades, world wars, and the ravages of the Byzantine Empire. But last week, an angry mob burned it to the ground. Across Egypt, Coptic Christians are being targeted. Here is the tally of Coptic houses of worship from Alexandria to the Sinai, wiped off the face of the earth. In some cases, the homes and businesses of Copts reportedly marked with a black X and some type of paint literally on the building, raising fears that we are witnessing ethnic cleansing.
Dramatic pictures from inside the university show where the al-Shabaab gunmen raged. Piles of clothing, bullet holes, testaments to moments of terror. Outside, the faithful are gathering to pray, even as families mourn. The response from Christians during this Holy Week is particularly pointed because witnesses say the gunmen came specifically for them. Peter Pham is with the Atlantic Council, an international affairs think tank.
One of the first targets at Garissa University College was a lecture hall where Christians met in the morning for voluntary prayer. They also then went through the rooms and asked people to separate themselves. And this has been a pattern in recent Shabaab attacks.
Witnesses say the same thing happened during the mall attack in Nairobi in 2013. And some security analysts say other extremists acting in the name of Islam are clearly going after Christians. ISIS has been tied to massacres of Christians. How many is unclear, but dozens this year alone.
ISIS keeps finding new ways to horrify. This time, 21 Coptic Christians from Egypt beheaded on a beach in Libya.
Militants brutally behead 4 Christian children in Iraq, all of them under the age of 15. The leader of the Anglican Church in Baghdad says it's because they wouldn't denounce Jesus and then convert to Islam.
ISIS and the extermination of Christians, that's the topic of tonight's Byline. Now, there are some stories emerging from the Middle East as of late, but one particular story seems to be getting glossed over by the mainstream media. What's that? I'm talking about an entire civilization that's being stomped out of the Middle East. Christians are being persecuted en masse, and the silence in the media and the West more generally is deafening.
When a nation drives out God, it's never neutral. It always brings in other gods. So as we've driven God out, this thing just appeared this August in New York City after the Supreme Court ruled. On the Empire State Building is the projection of a false and foreign god. It is probably the largest image of a false god in the history of man. That's the Hindu god Kali. This god is the god of darkness. Kali is also the god of death and destruction here over New York City. I believe a great shape.
Get down to the core of it, that's actually the way they think.
Further, you said Clinton and Obama created ISIS. Is that by pulling out too early before the job was done? Is that what you meant by that comment?
Largely, that was one of the reasons. That's one of the ways that
Elliptic view of things. I mean, they look at this as the end of times, and so this is not just a battle. They're not just carving out a territory. The world is effectively coming to an end. Islam is going to triumph, and everybody else is going to be annihilated. So when you really
is to blame for the rise of ISIL. He has dismantled the ability to defend this country. We no longer interrogate terrorist suspects. We read them their rights and put them in federal court. We're going to have less FBI agents in 2017 than we did in 20.
Okay, with your expertise and experience, why do they go after the Christians?
Well, look, in addition to fighting sort of a military campaign, ISIS has a really
ISIS happened. The way he pulled out was absolutely, number one, he announced a date so that the enemy just withdrew, waited, and then they go back in. ISIS was formed, and you could say very nicely that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama gave us ISIS.
Barack Obama